Engineering. My name is Rafael Calvo, and it is a pleasure to host you today. Now, normally we will be welcoming you into our design building in South Kensington in London, where we will be able to offer you nibbles and drinks and the opportunity to socialize. But of course, this is not possible today. So before I introduce our esteemed speaker, I would like to give you a quick sense of who we are. We are the youngest school at Imperial College London and have been operating since 2014. We have a 4-year degree, a master's in design engineering, and we also have 2 double master's programs, one called Innovation Design Engineering and then Global Innovation Design, both jointly run with the Royal College of Art. As well as the I often get asked, what is design engineering? One short answer is that it combines design and engineering in a purpose-driven and interdisciplinary way. Our work is purpose-driven in that it is geared toward innovating solutions in specific areas. In our school, we currently have 4 of these theme areas: future of mobility, health and aging, sustainable growth, and AI and data. But second, it is interdisciplinary by nature. Imagine each of these threads here in this drawing as different disciplines. Researchers in most fields tend to work with others in the same field. In fact, the way our institutions are divided up make it challenging to do otherwise. However, the complex global problems that we are facing represent interdependent systems that require multidisciplinary insights, interdisciplinary know-how, and solutions. We teach our design engineers to approach problems from an interdisciplinary standpoint by default. As a baseline, they combine design methods with engineering processes, and they seek out collaborations with experts in the domains they're contributing to. This allows them to sketch a larger picture of the problem from the start and to view it from multiple angles. We can think of the result as a tapestry that arises from the strategic integration of multiple threads. For example, my work involves weaving a tapestry to inform how technologies can support psychological well-being. It involves experts in psychology, philosophy, medicine, economics, and other fields. In fact, our work in well-being began around 2014 with our book Positive Computing, which synthesized knowledge to inform well-being supportive technology. And here's where Rosalind Picard comes in. This work on well-being evolved from my earlier work on affective computing, the field that our speaker, Rosalind Picard, famously launched officially with her book in 1997. The field of affective computing has since come of age with its own IEEE journal, the Oxford Handbook of Affective Computing, which I co-edited in 2015, and a growing research community. But it is only when a field reaches some maturity that it has the confidence to look at itself more critically. With growing concerns about the impacts of AI and data capture on society, some leaders in affective computing have begun to work with colleagues in philosophy, sociology, economics, and other fields to broaden the lens. Although the discourse sometimes gets oversimplified in the media, it's essential we advance critically, cautiously, and in a way that can safeguard against harms without missing worthwhile opportunities to benefit humanity. Some work on safeguarding is already underway. For example, my colleagues in our Systems and Algorithms laboratory have developed techniques to allow users to configure their voice sharing preferences when using voice technologies like Alexa. Designs like this can help people keep control over sensitive information, like emotion, and choose when and with whom to share. Today, we have the privilege to hear from Rosalind Picard about the ethical challenges presented by work on emotion and how we might move forward effectively. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce Professor Picard. I have known Rose Picard for about 10 years, and to me, she exemplifies the interdisciplinary nature of the design engineering. Someone who integrates engineering, design, psychology, and other fields with innovative results. Ross is a founder and director of the Affective Computing Lab at the MIT Media Lab, where she leads research developing AI and machine learning and analytics to improve human health and well-being. She's also the co-founder of Affectiva, which provides emotion AI, communication technologies, and co-founder and chairman of the board and chief scientist of Empatica. There is a company that created the first FDA clear smartwatch to detect seizures. She's the author of over 300 papers in the fields of AI, affective computing, and digital health. And she has also been named a member of the National Academy of Engineering and fellow both of IEEE and AAAC. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you so much, Rafa, for inviting me to be here. And I do wish and look forward to the time when we can all be back together safely and physically. As Rafa mentioned, I have 2 disclosures. I'm a shareholder in 2 of the spin-out companies from my lab, Affectiva and Empatica. Today, I'd like to dive into some specifics, mostly from my lab, but reflect in a larger sense on them, on topics related to AI with emotional intelligence, the risks and benefits, a portion of the ethical issues. First, what is EI, emotional intelligence? I deliberately made this paper small because I don't want you reading it right now, but I do recommend it. The 1990 Salve and Mayer paper got this whole topic on the map for scholars, doing a lot of scholarly work around it. This was very popularized by Dan Goleman about 5 years later in his book, Emotional Intelligence, where it then took off and started being taught in schools and all over the world. Around the same time that Dan was writing his book, I was working on affective computing. The idea that I was trying to put forth in this book was that computers, in order to be intelligent, are going to need the skills of emotional intelligence. These are skills that can be taught. They include, in a human, the ability to send and receive accurate affective information or express and recognize that in others, to handle the emotions of other people as well as your own. And of course, if you have emotions, being able to regulate those or utilize them in service of better decision-making and action selection and so forth. Now, computers do not have emotions or feelings like people do. That said, they can appear to have them, and they can appear to regulate them and utilize them. And they certainly can put on the appearance of expressing emotions even without having these feelings. And we've made huge progress in their ability to infer somebody else's affective state, given lots of specific context and multiple signals. And while they can't do any of these things perfectly, neither can people. And there is a lot of progress being made. Now, why would you want to have a computer have these skills of emotional intelligence? Well, first of all, people express emotion to many forms of computers as if they did understand. And people are sometimes surprised to realize, they not only yell at their cars and their microwaves, but their vacuum cleaners these days and just about everything. But traditionally, these devices do not respond, even though they now have the sophisticated processing ability to respond if they want. The first device that responded that I know of and did so with skills of emotional intelligence was the thesis work of Cynthia Brazil. This is quite old now, but it's still extremely pioneering and illustrates
another important
a key state
for the robot to be
robots still
people
need to
is
read.
being able to recognize communicative intent. Very good, Kismet. And the way we've done that with Kismet right now is to have the robot recognized by tone of voice. Are you praising it? Are you scolding it?
Where'd you put your body? No. No. You're not to do that. No.
So people have said that to the Roomba. No, no, do not do that. No. And of course, Roomba keeps doing it. If you do this, if we bring this to what a lot of people have today in their kitchens and countertops, they have speech reception devices. They ask them questions. For example, Alexa, what's the right way to Walmart? And Alexa has been known to say things like, the right way to spell Walmart is W-A-L, not what you asked. Customer can repeat this, get kind of frustrated. And ideally, a smart computer would take that as feedback in their machine learning and learn not to do that again. So emotional intelligence would give the computer the ability to read that negative sentiment, that no, no, do not do that kind of response. And instead of it having to be anthropomorphic, like Kismet was, where Kismet shriveled back and put its ears back and looked sorry, the system could do something appropriate to that system. It could apologize. It could just say, oops, sorry, let me try again. What companies are starting to do, however, is more than just try to give users a great experience. Many of them are also noting your state and using that to try to sell you more stuff. And also maybe even to determine the price, because it's known, for example, that if people are a little sadder, they're more inclined to want to change their situation. They might pay more for something. They might accept less to sell it. And that could be a way to exploit them and make money off of them. Now, it goes beyond these examples I've just given here. I want to give maybe one of the most extreme examples. And this is something to think about, especially when we try to consider the gap between what we're doing in the science and what the public is believing about the science. The Tonight Show is the top-rated late night American TV show. And this is a clip from several years ago of the robot Sophia. There are a lot more clips of Sophia online, even newer, you can look up. But I want to play this one for you.
Let's meet our next robot. This one came all the way from Hong Kong. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Hanson Robotics, David Hanson, and his robot, Sophia. Oh my gosh, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Nice to meet you as well. David, you brought a friend with you here, and this is really kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, this is Sophia. And Sophia is a social robot. And she has artificial intelligence software that we've developed at Hanson Robotics, which can process visual data. She can see people's faces. She can process conversational data, emotional data, and use all of this to form relationships with people.
Okay, so, I mean, she's basically alive. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. She is basically alive. Would you like to maybe give it a try?
Sure. Give it. I'll just say. What's? She's like. You see how awkward my first dates are. It's a robot. I'm getting nervous around a robot. A very pretty robot. What do I just say hello to?
Yeah.
Hi, Sophia.
Hello, Jimmy.
Oh my God. Do you know where you are?
Of course. I'm in New York City, and I'm on my favorite show, The Tonight Show.
Sophia, can you tell me a joke?
Sure. What cheese can never be yours?
What cheese can never be mine? I don't know.
Nacho cheese.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I like nacho cheese.
Nacho cheeses. Ew.
Gosh, you did ew.
I'm getting laughs.
Yeah.
Maybe I should host the show.
Okay.
All right. He says, okay, stay in your lane, girl. And by the way, you can find the whole thing online if you want. It's entertaining. The show is entertainment, right? However, when people see an autonomous machine and they see a brilliant scientist like David Hansen, who does fabulous design and engineering, come on board and say she's basically alive, they hear she is alive. They hear she has been given citizenship in Saudi Arabia, even though that's really a publicity stunt. They don't hear that it's a publicity stunt. They hear that this female has more rights than, and well, she's allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia before women were, I was told. They hear she has more rights than some human beings. And yet the machine goes in a box at the end of these events. And even though it commands quite an amazing speaker fee. What is the truth? Well, Sophia is not alive, even if someone said she was basically alive. This robot acts in some ways that appear alive, and yet people are being told something more extreme than that. I sent David a congratulations note after this, like, this is a really impressive appearance. He confirmed what I suspected, which is that it was scripted and rehearsed. While Sophia did these things, the whole series of exchanges was very carefully orchestrated. Sophia, while capable of making a disgust expression, the ew sound, and appearing to have feelings, and appearing, to, hey, they're laughing, I'm funny, appearing to be conscious, appearing to respond to the audience's and the host's feelings. Sophia does not have feelings. Sophia is not conscious of anything. And yet the average person watching this might have come away with a very different set of impressions. So one ethical thing I think we need to do increasingly is clarify for the public what is entertainment and science fiction and what is real. Now, Rafa said, as the field becomes mature, we start to look at these concerns, which made me think, gee, I guess even when the field is very immature, and I wrote this very first piece on it, I actually brought up a lot of concerns. I'm just going to quickly run through some of them here. They include the ability to deceive people with displays of emotional expressions and empathy. This was back in 95 when I wrote the first part of this, in 96. Eliciting or promoting false trust and expectations, sharing or selling data that we think of as very private, manipulating people's feelings to affect sales, to profit from people. The temptation of bosses to want to know what employees are feeling, not just to make their lives better, but maybe to, in some places that are very oppressive, to control employees. And we certainly know governments that are trying to control their entire group of citizens, reneging on promises to them and forcing all kinds of things on them that were not part of the original agreement promised to those citizens, and particularly powerful centralized governmental surveillance when there's an army enforcing what some leader there wants. We can also imagine people saying, gee, you live a high stress, angry lifestyle. Maybe we should jack up your health insurance or watch if you're more liable for certain kinds of accidents. And then we certainly see when something is not clearly marked as entertainment, misleading people's beliefs, especially about future AI. There are a lot of people whose anxiety and stress, anxiety climbed, depression became worse when they started to see that robots appeared to be able to even do the soft social, emotional, empathetic intelligence type skills that they thought were reserved for people. Now, I'm not going to exhaustively go through the ethics in this one talk. It's too big of a topic. As Rafa mentioned, actually, there's this great handbook of AC that he's a co-editor of that has a fabulous piece on ethical issues in affective computing by Roddy Cowie. Recently, Gretchen Green at Partnership on AI came out with another really excellent piece I commend to you on ethics of AI and emotional intelligence. And the IEEE has, led by John Havens and a whole host of super talented people in affective computing, have been working on a lot of different issues related to this for informing better ethical practice going forth. So there's a lot of great stuff out there that I'm not squeezing into the talk today, but I recommend all of these to you. Instead, I want to tell you some stories about specific technologies and how we're thinking about the benefits, the harms, and how I hope that these give us lessons to reflect on for future technology development in this area. The first story starts with a boy on the autism spectrum, and actually a whole group of people on the autism spectrum. Our ethical design informed approach is to work with the people that we're trying to build technology for and learn what they want. And many of them indicated to us that they had trouble in a face-to-face conversation processing the speech jointly with the facial expressions. And could we help interpret what was changing on the face and give them some clue to that? For example, is the person opening their brows and looking like they might be interested? Are they furrowing the brow, looking like they might be confused or thinking? Are they smiling? And is that in synchrony with something the person said? So maybe it's a kind of an amused smile, maybe not. We have other kinds of smiles too. So working with Rana El-Kalyoubi, we developed some real-time software that could start to add probabilities to these different combinations of patterns on the face and then interpret them. And so Affectiva was born because lots of companies and people on the autism spectrum were coming to us and asking for this software to use in various ways. By the way, we put ethical codes in our work where you could not do this without people's prior informed consent. What you see here is a demo software built to make it fun and educational for people to play with it. You can try things, see what works, what doesn't work on you, and get to understand a little bit more the limitations of these, which tend to be better at things like, are your eyes closed or open? And when it comes to actually interpreting the underlying affective state, we all know that you can make movements with your face that do or don't correspond to what you're feeling. So these two concepts need to be separated. And if you don't know that, a few minutes of interacting with something like this will help you with that. Using software like this and lots of other partners, for example, work of Brainpower, this is now in wearables that are out there being used by people on the autism spectrum to give them critical, contextualized, real-time feedback of what is going on somebody else's face if they point the camera at them. Now, pointing the camera at somebody else's face raises its own ethical questions. And I just want to touch on a couple of reflections here. First, we work with the people that something is for, trying to understand what they do and don't want. There is what we might call continuous emotion data sensing inside. Really, in this case, it's just a camera, but it is trying to interpret things changing on your face. It's not perfect, but it is trying to assist somebody who's really struggling with that. It is helping some people have better social emotional intelligence. What could go wrong? Well, a lot of things could go wrong. Joy Bolamini and the Media Lab did some fabulous work showing limitations of many different kinds of face reading systems with respect to race and gender, in particular, uneven performance across those. Fortunately, these are the kind of things that we can fix. And it is wonderful to see how the machine learning community has jumped on this and is now trying to build out much more fair representations of participants in data sets, ranging from faces to some work we're now doing with dermatological measures and so forth in medicine. Another thing that can go wrong is some people overgeneralize and do not pay attention to the specific context and have called for general bans on this kind of technology across all kinds of face processing. And that is something that worries me for a number of reasons. One is that if you are a seeing impaired or nonverbal learning disabled or autistic person or police officer or whatever, are you now going to be shut out of using technology that helps you to do your job better, that helps you to connect with people around you? So in some cases, the activists, who I think are very good intentioned, are not doing the work of learning about the different user groups. So they could really learn from partnering with good HCI researchers how to better respect human feelings of diverse people and understand the needs of specific cases and try to make regulations that are much more specific instead of so general. Let me give another story, another example, and I'll start with a short clip.
When people talk to each other, the majority of the information that's conveyed comes from the way we say things rather than the words we're actually saying. Eye contact, smiles, voice modulation, speaking rate, pauses, and emphasis on certain words often add an extra layer of information in our interactions. Many of us want to improve these interaction skills, but don't have the resources to do so. Imagine if you could practice your interaction skills with an automated system in the privacy of your own living room. A program designed at the MIT Media Lab lets you do just that.
Hi, I am Mary. I'm looking forward to doing your interview.
My automated conversation coach consists of a 3D character on a computer screen that can see, hear, and make its own decisions based on its interaction with a person, and it works on a personal computer.
Now, let's get started.
Using a webcam, the system can analyze facial expressions. For example, it can measure where in the interaction you are smiling and can recognize your head gestures, such as a nod or a shake. The system also analyzes your voice. It not only understands what you say, but how you say it. Using real-time speech recognition and prosody analysis, it can capture the nonverbal nuances of conversations and display it in an intuitive format. When you're done, it gives you a summary of the information. When you smiled, how fast you spoke, and so on. And it can show how these measures change over multiple sessions. It even allows you to watch the video of your interactions with various measures of your behavior displayed alongside the video, such as when you smile, how the volume of your voice rises and falls, and what words you emphasize. It even shows when your attention wanders.
I can't find you. Ah, there you are. You were saying.
In a study with 90 MIT undergraduates, the subjects went through simulated job interviews before and after receiving this training. Those who got the feedback from this automated system were rated as better candidates for the job than those who did not. Besides job interviews, the researchers say this system could help with public speaking, dating, learning languages, or helping people who have difficulties in social communications.
All right, this was the doctoral work
People talk to
of Ehsan Huck at MIT. And I bring this up because another big controversy that's erupted is around software that might be used to read these cues from people during a job interview. And I think this illustrates a case where some of the same technology could be used in a way that really helps humans succeed in an interview, and also in a way that might be seen as very oppressive. So let's look first at some of the potential benefits here. In Ehsan's study, he randomized people to 3 groups. I won't go through all the detail here, but one group got training as usual. The second group got to interact with this mock nonverbal system and get to watch video of themselves afterwards. And then the third group did the same as the second group, but also got the affective computing, emotional intelligence analysis of several of the components of what was measured from them during this interaction with mock. We measured lots of things, won't go through it all here, but they include things like external reviewers blinded to our hypothesis and the condition of the participant, rating, did the person appear excited about the job across those 3 groups? Did they perform well during the interview across the 3 groups? And would you recommend hiring this person? And what we see is that people in this group that got this emotion analysis technology personalized, applied to them, and fed back to them were rated by people blinded to what condition people were in as performing significantly better, especially post versus pre of this interaction. Now, our focus here is to take this powerful technology and help you do better, help me do better, help us each become better at something that many of us can certainly improve on. It has uses today still in lots of areas. I recently had a doctor come to me and say, I'm just working with all these medical students who, when they sit down with somebody who has some really tough problems, especially in substance abuse, they are projecting on their face a very unwelcome appearance, which he thinks is not helping that physician-patient interaction. Could we help the doctors get better training so that they project affective information on their face that helps the therapy proceed more successfully? So there are a lot of interesting questions here, and I do think there's room to make significant improvements. At the same time, there's interest in industry taking these measures and I think in some cases making claims that I haven't seen justification for, that purport to predict if you would be a good hire for things they haven't even really observed you doing, and quite possibly trained on a very inadequate data set also. So we need to, I think, require that companies that make claims like this really back them up with great science and be very suspicious, and maybe even also prohibit certain kinds of claims because there are a lot of people out there who do not know how to evaluate them properly. Let me give as an example the rules and regulations that exist for polygraphs. Polygraphs are known as lie detection technology. And essentially the way they work is they measure physiology, much like we do in affective computing, and look for signs of stress. And if they're used smartly, they are interwoven into a very intelligent questioning strategy where you don't just try to read the overall level of stress, you read very specific changes relative to the kinds of questions that you're being asked. Now, this technology is generally prohibited during job interviews, and probably some of the misuses I just referred to should also just be generally prohibited during job interviews. However, there are interesting exceptions. And if you were to go into this legislation, which I encourage you if this interests you, you will find pages of details customizing what is and isn't allowed in different circumstances and when people need to be informed about their use. I think the work that's been done in polygraphy could be transferred over to many of the concerns that are being expressed right now for other uses in affect sensing technology. All right, on to another story with some different reflections coming up. In this story, again, it started as most of our most interesting work, I think, has with people on the autism spectrum. In this case, a person on the autism spectrum telling me, Roz, you've got it all wrong. I don't want to read people's faces. I want to, although other people did. She said, I don't. I have a different problem. My biggest problem is not understanding other people's emotions. My biggest problem is you're not understanding my emotions. Which made me feel about this big since I work on this. And I said, okay, what is it that I'm missing? I'm sorry, how can I do better? And she said, you're missing my stress. As I learned more about it, I realized she wanted a wearable that could communicate to others things and to herself, and she could choose to show that to certain people she trusted when her autonomic stress levels were climbing. So we took something we had in the lab, built a version that could go out in the wild. Here it's shown in a sweatband, loaned it to people who wanted it, as well as did a lot of controlled studies on our own. And then over one break, when a young man in my lab had borrowed it for his little non-speaking brother over the winter break, we noticed a huge spike in his data. And I thought the sensor must be broken. After doing a lot more work on this, I'm trained as an electrical engineer. I concluded it didn't look like it was the hardware, but I didn't know what it was. And I called the student at home on vacation and discovered that his little brother had had a grand mal seizure. And the grand mal seizure was responsible for this gigantic peak that I was seeing. Now, I'm an electrical engineer. I've been learning a lot of psychology and HCI stuff, but I didn't know anything about neurology and epilepsy. So I realized as I started to learn a little bit about this, that this could be an important thing. And we began doing studies with Boston Children's Hospital with epilepsy patients 24/7 being monitored classically for EEG on their scalp, electrocardiogram, and now electrodermal activity. Initially bilateral, because we found the seizure signal on just one side initially, although usually with a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, also called a grand mal seizure, the response happens on both sides. We found in the first set of data that 100% of the grand mal seizures had more than 2 standard deviations above the pre-seizure baseline response with the electrodermal activity. It was not far in advance of the seizure as we had hoped. It was turning out when it was properly synchronized with the brain activity to happen exactly when the brain activity fired. Fast forward, we work of Ming Po and others, we built a machine learning algorithm that could run the AI with this call it emotion sensing, but the output now is not an emotion label. The output is to take that affective data and associate it with a very serious medical condition. In fact, much more serious than I realized. It turns out there's this thing called Pseudo, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. I had never heard of it. There's a death from it every 7 to 9 minutes in the world. It takes more lives every year in the US than sudden infant death syndrome, which just about everybody's heard of in the US. Kills more people than house fires. And yet a lot of people don't know about it. And in part, they didn't seem to know about it because doctors hadn't been telling them that it could happen. In part because doctors didn't know if anything could be done about it. Now we know that when a person has a seizure and they're not alone at the time of the seizure, then they are more than 65% more likely to not die of SUDEP. We could prevent a very large number of SUDEPs by having somebody there with you at the time of a seizure. With this, I worked with a team at Empatica to get this made into a medical quality device. And you'll see that here. It's called Embrace, first FDA cleared smartwatch monitoring seizures. Now, some activists might be a little worried. It's running continuous data monitoring and analytics. And if you choose, it can associate that with your GPS. That is being done now by choice, fully informed consent and doctor's prescription by people who are now getting potentially life-saving alerts. Now, the technology does not save your life, but it gets somebody there who may help save your life. This is measuring motion and skin conductance. So my skin conductance went through the roof one morning when I saw this mail from a mom. She said her daughter was wearing Embrace. She was in the shower. She saw her smartphone go off saying her daughter might be having a seizure. She enters her bedroom, finds her daughter face down in bed, blue, not breathing. She flips her daughter over, repositioning her daughter, checking the airways were open. Her daughter took a breath and another breath, and her color came back, and she was fine the rest of the day. Here's a picture of her. Now, the AI is not saving the life here, but the AI is working with a person to understand a situation better than a person can alone, to provide this continuous sensing and to bring somebody there in a time that can help save a life. What we see from this example is not just a life-saving intervention with continuous emotion analysis going on, but also that this kind of innovation arose completely unexpectedly from completely unregulated research in affect sensing technology. And I give this example not just because here's this wonderful family who this has made all the difference in their lives, and there are many families like this now because this device is now out there used by many who are now celebrating birthdays instead of funerals. But we cannot foresee what we're going to do with this technology. We don't know. I was working on stress and we accidentally discovered grand mal seizures. Because we cannot foresee many good things that could come of it, I think it's really important that whatever ethical guardrails we put in place preserve the ability to do creative innovations with this research. All right, another example, if you're not exhausted yet from all my examples, is the area of mental health. And if you're not aware of this, for like the last 15 years, depression has been climbing, especially among the young, people under age 26. This is not a blip. This is a very large set of data. And this, by the way, these data in before the pandemic. According to the latest pandemic data, ER visits have been down, emergency room visits have been down, but the percent of them among youth that are mental health related has grown significantly. In our work, we're interested in not just how to treat depression, but how to prevent depression. And thus we're interested in how can we measure things that might help you and me each privately understand our own well-being in a personalized way that is actionable, evidence-based. This one graph is not real data. All my other graphs are real data. This is a concept diagram. And what you see here is, imagine we could measure hundreds of things we can actually that contribute to understanding if you're doing well or not doing well. Over time, what we see, here's an example where maybe persons on the red and blue line here come into a situation and they're both doing better. As time comes along and they encounter major stressors, like we've been doing for at least a year now, everybody takes a hit. Some a big hit, some a little hit. But if you are resilient, and we're still trying to understand all those factors in a personalized way, you're going to bounce back. If you're fragile, it's like you just keep taking the hits and you don't have enough of whatever it takes to overcome it, resilience factors. How do we learn these? How do we help you learn what yours are? We have been adapting AI, wearable sensing, data on your smartphone with your prior informed consent. And of course, you could drop out at any time, and everything encrypted and identity protected as much as we can, which hold that red flag there. I'll come back to that. And then applying lots of different kinds of machine learning to see if we can figure out not only how to forecast tomorrow's stress, mood, and health, but also allow you to see what's contributing to it. Now, these methods using only passive data are already pretty accurate. They're in sort of the upper 70s to mid to upper 80s in accuracy. And accuracy varies for individuals. And most of the data sets are still hundreds of people. We really need a lot more. Your mileage definitely can vary. A problem with this technology, one of many, I don't have time to talk about everything, is that if you're given depressing forecast and you're already depressed, that is bad news, right? And that could fuel worse depression potentially. So you might not want that. So we're not releasing this yet. We don't want to release something that could make somebody's bad situation worse. We are, however, trying to learn things like what could you do that might make your day better tomorrow? What might make it lower stress? What might make your mood better? What may reduce your chance of getting sick? In fact, this has led to super cool separate work on forecasting health, which I'm not talking about today, but that Empatica just took and developed with Duke and Stanford and others, and is now a CE medical, European certified medical device for forecasting if you're going to have influenza or COVID tomorrow. Actually, it doesn't do the same as the PCR. It uses that as the gold standard, but it forecasts if your body is showing the signs of fighting an infection the day before you test positive. So if you could get this early warning, not for COVID, although that's really cool and that's now out there, but for stress and mood, then that might be really good news for you. Dr. Ahino Sakari just finished a PhD looking at a lot of these factors. These were not in a personalized way here. We need much bigger data sets for that right now. This was for a group of New England college students, and finding that the biggest factor, as we had found in some previous work, is sleep regularity or sleep irregularity. If your sleep times are all over the place, that usually bodes very poorly for tomorrow's stress. If you have regular sleep timing and you add to it positive social interaction, then you have the strongest association with tomorrow being a better day. Now, I should caution, all these data right now are associations. We cannot prove causality. We have to design a different kind of study for that. But these are really nice to identify some things that we might use for causal studies. You might be saying, what? Smartphones and social media, like, doesn't that make everything worse? Aren't you making things, aren't you hurting their mental health? There have been some really nice studies like the one at UPenn showing that reducing social media use to only 10 minutes a day in a nice randomized control trial, so it is a causal finding, is associated with better mental health. And even just moderating, watching your own social media use can reduce fear of missing out problems and so forth. So there's a lot of great research happening in this space right now. And we certainly need to acknowledge that that this is a complex space, and there are good things in the space and there are really horrible things in the space. One of the factors that drives the things I think that upset people the most is that it is unregulated right now, with the exception of the EU GDPR and movements to improve things like that, and some very limited, narrow, specific things like you can't use lie detection technology in generic interviews. Otherwise, tech companies can kind of do whatever they want. They can gather up your physiological and affective data. They're doing that. And they can associate it with what you're buying, with your medical conditions, with your calendar information, with just about anything and everything. It is an unregulated space. I don't know about you, that worries me. I would like to see much stronger communication, informed consent, and opt-in requirements. Now, even that, though, poses challenges. Let's think about it. Every software we're using, we've opted in, right? We've signed some terms of service, some end-user license agreement. And I don't know about you, but usually for me, it's like, I need this stuff. I need it now. I'm just going to click this thing. I'll read it later. Very rarely do I read the whole thing. And that's not good, right? In fact, what I think is we might need some reform around making these things, making like a generic template of what you will accept, and then letting us know only when this thing deviates from that. There needs to be great improvement in this. This isn't like the IRB ethics review board in our university where you're going to sit down with each person individually, read the consent form, talk to them about it, answer any questions they have. We need that kind of reform, I think, but it has to be scalable. So this is an area for real need of improvement. I would say that most of the opt-in consent forms out there really do not follow the Belmont report requirements. They do not live up to the IRB standards that we have in universities. They may not be illegal, but they are really questionable in their in how ethical they are. All right, I want to wrap up and hopefully have time for some questions. And again, I haven't been able to cover everything comprehensively here, but I'm just going to touch on a few key things that I think I haven't seen quite as much on in the literature. Number one, we just have to start with the opportunity for enormous benefits for people. They range from potentially helping save lives, to preventing terrible diseases, to enabling better personalized insights and treatments and treatment by doctors. There are so many things I can't even begin to imagine that this brilliant audience I'm talking to right now, I'm sure, is capable of inventing. And we need to facilitate and foster and allow continued great innovation in this space. People keep saying, oh, well, we can de-identify stuff. And the National Institute of Health now is, all the data they've funded the collection of, they want it on the web. And they think if we've made it HIPAA compliant, which in the US means you've stripped away, the name, the address, the social security number, the birth date, the date they showed up at the hospital, the zip code, all that kind of stuff. They think it's de-identified. But colleagues like Javier Hernandez and Dan McDuff have brilliantly shown that even just reading accelerometer data from my wristband when I'm holding still can give a signature. Not only can they pull out my heart rate and respiration, but the patterns of those in a, mind you, very small end study, but they were unique enough to identify most of the people in that study. With continued work on that, we would expect people could be identified with a few pieces of information from data that the NIH would consider de-identified. So this belief that your data might be de-identified should be questioned. I'm particularly concerned about the rapid growth of this technology in at least one country that is ruled by a single party and has a reputation for saying one thing and doing another, and in particular, not telling their citizens the truth and deploying this kind of technology, not for the benefit of their citizens, but for the oppression of their citizens. And this is something I don't know how to solve with our technology, but it's a very serious concern. And I think we need to help our friends and colleagues in places like that to have support to try to, and creative solutions for how to work around this. We're working around it with some innovations that can obscure your affective information in the signal using AI, not only to personalize, but to depersonalize, and to also learn how not just to extract certain signals, but to jam and hide certain signals. Also, I just want to mention again, I don't think prior consent will solve all of this because it's typically not fully informed. We have to work more on what that means and how to help people with that. What can you do? My last slide here. I want to encourage you to think about your own work. make sure you know who is paying for your personal data and why is it so valuable to them. Find out who's paying for your research, who's paying for your salary, what do they hope to gain from the work you're doing? How do you feel about their mission and their purpose and how they are taking the fruits of your labor? If you can, talk to people around you about how the fruits of your labor are being distributed. Are the benefits equally reaching diverse members of society? Are the risks being shared in a fair and appropriate way? And then finally, I just challenge you to think about how you're spending your time. And are you spending it on things that you feel at the end of the day you could sleep well, you're moving forward, good causes? And if not, and if you have questions about that, I encourage you to reach out to others and talk about it. By getting the conversation going, I think we can all help each other to see more clearly what we're doing that we want to be doing, what maybe each of us needs to stop doing or think about doing differently. And working together, hopefully bringing together all the different strengths of people creating technology, serving people's health, activists, politicians, everybody. I think together we can work on building a kind of a future where we see this technology used for great and ethical benefits, and we really rein in the uses that we don't want to see. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Ross, for a great talk. And I can see there's already quite a few questions in the chat. And I invite all the audience. We have quite a few people in the audience to ask questions there, and I will try to filter or just read them to you. But before I read the ones from the audience, I would like your opinion of what else can we do besides regulation? I think many of the ethical concerns that people have raised come out from the fact that policymakers take a while to implement, well, even to understand these sort of technologies and the potential impact they can have. And society has to have a conversation about these issues, but it might take years for this policy to be introduced, and by then it might be already too late because the technology is already really established, and once it gets established, it's very hard to pull it out. So what else can we do?
Thanks for asking that, because I don't think we can just rely on regulations, right? People also break regulations, and in some countries, the regulations are a farce. They serve the person in power, right? I think the ultimate responsibility relies on every innovator, and it's really almost too much to put on us also, because we can't foresee all the uses of what we're innovating. So it's very important that we not innovate in isolation, that we have conversations like we're having today, that we interact with people who are different from us so that we get challenged and we invite challenges to our viewpoints. I love it when a person on the autism spectrum would tell me, Roz, you have it all wrong. I mean, you don't really love it, right? But you know that is so valuable, right? When people will not just tell you yes, 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 but will question and help you think in a nice way, hopefully. We need each other's differences and strengths to come together and try to find solutions to some of these really hard problems. I don't have solutions for them. I mentioned several I don't have solutions for. But I do think the responsibility is, I'm glad you emphasize this, not just on the regulations. It could take 10 years or so to get those to happen. And even then they're like outdated and they refer to the wrong thing. Ultimately, the responsibility is with everybody who is touching that technology in some way on the way out to the customer. And then ultimately in the use of the customer's hands also. Each one of us. Nobody here is absolved.
Thank you. And I think there is a number of initiatives about involving the community and policymakers in discussions about the potential impact of these technologies. The second issue that I see arising from the media has been questioning sometimes the validity of some of these technologies in the real world, potentially discrediting the other kind of conversations, because if you think that the technology is so bad, it cannot have an impact, So Is there a way of dealing with that? Because if the conversations are all assuming that the technology is not working, then nobody's going to do anything.
Yeah, I think some of the key problems were some people presented a straw man that, kind of an oversimplified view. For example, saying, look, if a smile doesn't mean you're happy, then no emotion recognition technology works, right? Well, we've known a smile doesn't mean you're happy from day one, and yet there's a lot of development of things that in a careful context with personalization, with multiple signals, we can probably tell the difference between if the smile means you're happy or you're frustrated or you're faking it. But if you're just presented with a smile and none of that context, there's huge ambiguity. So we're much smarter than what some of the oversimplified portrayals in the media present. So first of all, if you see an oversimplification of what's going on, question it. It's probably not entirely, telling what's going on. There's a lot of fake news out there, not just in the US, I hear. It's going global.
Thank you. So some questions from the audience. Cesar Collazos from Colombia is asking, is there any methodology used by you to include human values in the design process in order to not affect the cultural, social, or religious value of the community?
You're reminding me of the work of Batya Friedman and my former student Carson Reynolds, my late student, and others trying to bring that in. And yes, I think it absolutely needs to be contextualized with the values of the users that you're developing for, which is why it's so important to do what the best HCI people do. And that is to talk to those people you're designing for from the beginning, find out what they really care about. Quite often it's not what you really want to do your thesis on. And it's important to try to get that alignment so that at the end of the day, you're building something that aligns with the values, which may be very different from your values. So take time to learn those. Also, if you don't know your own values, it's really important. It's also important for your mental health to connect with communities that talk about meaning and purpose and spiritual and religious and other greater things in the world, and not just be self-absorbed. More than ever, there's great science showing that involvement in those communities is associated with significant improvements in physical health and mental health.
Thank you. Omar Sadek asks, do you think emotional AI can help in identifying sexual violence incidents and help in its mitigation?
I'm not an expert on those cases, but I understand there's a lot of trauma and pain involved. And I have been working with at least one person who is looking at some sentiment analysis and some peer-to-peer support in that space. So the answer is yes, in very narrow ways that complement what people are doing. I do not see it replacing what an expert, skilled therapist or human is needed for in that case.
G. Green asks, how will emotion recognition technology deal with individual differences as people may express emotions in different ways?
Yes, thanks. That looks like Gretchen, who's the author of that awesome PAI piece I mentioned. There is a lot of individual variation. There's not only individual variation, there's individual times situation times culture variation, right? I might know to be very unexpressive during a business negotiation, especially if I'm in a country like Finland or Japan. But if I'm going out for karaoke in Japan after work, you're allowed to be very expressive, right? So it's not just personalized to an individual. It needs to be personalized and contextualized socially and culturally. And so it gets very complicated because it's more than just reading things from the individual. And yes, the technology is getting better at doing all that, right? If you let your phone know that you're in a bar versus in a business setting, what country you're in, what time of day it is, and the multimodal signals coming off your body, it will have a better chance of understanding a little bit more of what might be going on with you.
David Villegas asks, can emotional AI help young men who are in danger due to the rough childhood environment?
I'm detecting a theme to some of these questions of, can this AI with emotional intelligence solve these really big, scary, hard problems? I think there are a lot of questions like that on the list. I don't think it can solve these in huge ways. However, if the problem that you're looking at involves maybe some subtle emotional information over time that maybe somebody's having trouble articulating, sometimes the physiological sensing can help externalize that and bring out something that they can share with somebody else in a safe place and be better understood by people maybe who are in denial of that situation. When they see objective data, sometimes they finally become convinced of what they should have already known. In fact, I've heard that many times, like, you're showing us what we already knew, but now we believe it, right? And so getting to that level of real belief, I think, can make progress in a lot of these difficult situations. But do not think of this as a silver bullet. It is not an instant, buy this piece of software and it will solve this huge problem. Everything has inaccuracies in it. Everything needs to be used very carefully with usually a really intelligent human expert alongside. Even go back to lie detection. In general, used by most people, it's not accurate. Used very carefully by super experts in a controlled situation, the super experts say actually it could be very accurate in some settings. So there is quite a diversity of outcomes here, and we need to be careful about the ones that would be harmful, especially the errors that would be harmful.
Lavanya is asking, in AI with emotional intelligence, what are some of the key sub-areas of research do you think need work in the coming days?
AI with emotional intelligence, what are the key areas that need work? Pretty much all the areas still need progress. I would urge you to focus on ones where you can clearly see a path where the users are kind of asking for the benefits the technology can provide, that there's somebody who really has a challenge or a deficit or something in some area, and the technology together plus the person can kind of augment their ability and make their life better. We like to think of not trying to build the greatest AI on the planet. The whole Media Lab's focus has not been on trying to build the super AI, but on trying to help people be healthier and smarter and better connected, better mental and physical health. So we see technology as extending human ability, as augmenting human ability in intelligent ways. So I would look for the applications there that help make a person's life better.
Seba is asking, how can we handle human bias in emotional intelligence, like racism?
And I see this. Greetings from Chile. Nice to have you here. I'm actually really hopeful about the way AI can handle racism and bias because you contrast it to what happens with people. People keep these things secret. They may say that they aren't racist or biased, but then we see their behavior over time, right? And say, gee, that doesn't look good. An algorithm, we can subject it to tests. We can look at the data and how it's treating people across different categories objectively. So I think we've already seen, thanks to Joy Bolamini's work and that of others, just huge, rapid progress, fabulous impact of her work on the community saying we've got to get better representation in our data sets. We've got to test them across these different groups. Actually, groups like the FDA have already been imposing this for different ages and different medical conditions for years. Now they're also jumping on the bandwagon and recognizing we have to do this for different races, different cultures, which means more data. And I wouldn't say we're there yet. It's definitely not solved yet, but it is solvable, which is really nice to see.
Salma Andre is asking, do you think that the physical appearance of the robot with affective intelligence can impact the user interaction with the machine?
Great question. Yes, absolutely, it impacts it. If the robot looks like it's about this big and it's a squash and stretch thing that looks like a vegetable with big, cute eyes, you don't expect it to be very intelligent. You just expect it to maybe like dance with you or smile when you smile or be for fun. When it looks like Sophia, then you have a whole nother level of expectations. And a lot of emotion that we experience is about comparing an expectation to what happens next. So our emotions around them will be different because our expectations around them are different. So the appearance, the design are made to sort of push those automatic buttons in lots of different ways. So if you're designing these things, I want you, urge you to think very carefully about how people feel and change their expectations around the design you make.
If I might follow up on Salma's question, one of the discussions in ethics has been that most of the robots tend to be white, and in some cases female, when there are gender roles that would suggest that one is better than a male. So there are many biases with regards to gender and race that are implicitly reflected in the kind of robots or devices that we're creating. What are your thoughts about that, and how can we promote a community where this is better managed?
Yeah, great question. First of all, talking about it here is great, right? Get everybody thinking about it, or at least on this call. Probably this is the more savvy group here. Talk to, the companies selling them, go talk to them, sit down, have coffee with them, point out what they're doing. They may not even be aware of it. I often find that what somebody's upset about, the person doing it has no idea. So my number one rule is assume the best of the person. Don't start off by assuming that they're out to get you or out to be racist or out to do something bad. Try to establish some kind of relationship and talk to them. And that, I think, can hopefully start to change things. Now, it may be that they think their customers want this. So then you've got a much bigger challenge, right? And there, we may need to do something on more of a societal scale.
And what happens, Ross, when the gender roles sometimes are good for business? So sometimes those established gender roles might be convenient for a company to maintain them, right? And but on the other hand, that is a status quo that sometimes is not good for society to advance. What can we do on that?
Yeah, it's always a challenge if you're working with a business that's very resource tight or very short-sighted with their financial goals, to try to get them to think of things that are bigger and ethical. I'm really encouraged by young people today who are willing to speak up in their workplaces and say, we don't want this. We want to work for a company that has these kinds of values, this kind of mission. Now, it still has to make money or they're not gonna be able to give you a job. So, again, it's everybody's job here to figure out how to do that, right? How to do ethical work with your time that fosters, employment opportunities also, right? So don't be naive and think that it's all about just values and mission. No, you have to, at the end of the day, provide something of value that somebody's willing to pay for, hopefully a fair price, and a safe product, and a life-affirming product. But these things are hard. So be patient with one another and speak up.
Johanny says, to identify affective state of a person, is facial expression the most promising way? Because if we can have emotional intelligent interfaces without revealing a face, it may be more comfortable.
You can, so first of all, you don't need faces, right? Like I can talk to you on the phone and listen from your tone of voice. I can ask you, how are you feeling? You may say, I don't want to tell you. Fine. I might still hear something in your voice. This is why moms and dads want their kids from college, not just to text, right? They want to understand, does my child sound really tired? Does my child sound excited? Does my child sound depressed? These are important cues that somebody who loves you and cares about you wants. And usually in a safe situation, we're happy to share that, and often happy to share our face as well. I think number one, you should just look at what people are comfortable with sharing. You can get affect from just about anything. You can get affect from watching how I pick up my water glass. Do I pick it up with a happy swoop, or do I yank it away like when I'm mad about something, oops, and the water pops out? So these adverbs of just about everything we do convey affect. You don't need a face. In fact, the face, it can be one of the easiest places to hide information also. That said, if people are comfortable face-to-face, it's a powerful additional channel, and not perfect for people or machines, but another cue to use.
Mick is asking, is there a danger that one is actively victimizing demographics one considering need of these AI tools?
Is there a danger that one is actively victimizing
the demographics, let's say the group with autism, and then you are victimizing them? I think that maybe is what this person means.
I'm not sure I'm understanding. We certainly don't want to victimize any demographics. In fact, this whole victim mentality thing these days, I think, we want to help victims, but we don't want to promote being a victim. So I think that's certainly something to try to understand if you're in a sensitive situation, that hopefully you're not promoting victimhood.
It might be related to other concerns that I have heard, for example, in recognizing mental illness, and are similar to the ones that you raise. That is when if you were able to recognize, let's say, depression automatically, that can be used for the wrong purpose. Even when you're trying to do good, sometimes the consequences can be negative, no? Because the person can be made feel worse about themselves, or there could be other consequences.
Yeah. Any sensitive private information about yourself, you want to think very carefully about who you share it with, right? And I think it helps, when we share it with a doctor, we're trusting the system has taught this doctor some ethics about, not blabbing our private information out loud at the coffee shop. But the doctor could still do that, right? In fact, they have signs in hospitals saying don't do that, which tells me that there are doctors who are still doing that. So this can, a lot of these problems happen already. What the technology does is it kind of makes it easier to have bad things be really bad, right? It's an amplifier on the bad stuff, which means all the more important that we put in place some guardrails before getting it out there. I think we don't have enough guardrails right now.
Julian Pierre asks, with soft tissues, an AI could feel its own vulnerability, then understand human emotions. Is this feasible or relevant?
It's interesting. So an AI could feel, all right, we need to talk a little bit about what that would mean. If it means what it means when you and I talk about it, where we have conscious awareness, we're nowhere near that kind of consciousness. If it means that the AI has a tissue with a sensor in it, that if you touch it or apply pressure to it, it registers a number that goes up with more pressure, and it reads that number, and then it translates that into a sentence of something like, I feel you might be touching me very slightly, or I feel you're really pressing on me hard, or ouch, right? Then it's going to give the appearance of having physical sensory feelings, right? Because a person who's naive about how it works says, I see that input, I hear that output, sounds to me, looks to me like the robot feels. We need to think about what situations we're going to allow that kind of thing to be presented to the public, and how they're going to feel, how real human feelings are going to change when that happens.
I think you will have to go, but before, there's one question here from Scott Strosser. Do you believe all emotions are social constructs? Lisa Feldman Barrett's research suggests it is all software and no hardware when it comes to our emotional world.
Lisa and a whole bunch of other theorists, Lisa confessed the other day, they don't like to, that they would rather use each other's toothbrushes than use each other's theories. They are looking to make theories that are as different as possible. I challenge the theorists to come up with a unified theory. If they do, my guess is it's all social constructs will go out the window. I think we see effects of hormones, we see effects of caffeine, we see effects of physical things. Somebody causes pain in you, you're very likely to react immediately with an anger kind of a expression. And so our brains are embodied. We are physical and social, we are hardware and software, physical, social, emotional, and a whole lot of other things we don't understand. So I am wary of any theory that, slices out a tiny piece of it and just tries to build a career around that. That's what they're trying to do, build a career around a piece, not build a unified theory that includes everything.
Do you have time for one more question, Ross?
I have time for one more. Yeah.
So FVM is asking, thank you. How do we deal with cross-cultural factors in ethics of AI? such as surveillance cameras in public areas that may not be acceptable in some countries, but may be welcome in some other countries?
Oh, nice, easy question to end on. Sorry, super hard. In the US, we have freedom of speech. We could protest, we could go to people, we could talk, hopefully without going to jail. Not all countries let you do that. So I'm afraid the solution is going to vary for the country, and we'd have to go country by country. And some countries have some great solutions, and I'm afraid some I really haven't a clue how to help. So it would be great if our community were to pull together and support people in those countries and help come up with creative solutions for them.
Thank you so much, Ross, for a fantastic talk and for the very interesting discussions afterwards. I would like to invite the audience also to follow us on LinkedIn. Next month, we have Don Norman giving a talk on the future of design education. You're very welcome to join us. And thank you again, Ross, for a very nice talk.
Thanks, Rafa. Pleasure. I hope you'll save all the questions for me. I look forward to reading all of them.
Bye-bye.
Take care.